As somebody who loves vinyl records, I'm constantly looking at online at other people, their vinyl record collection, how their records play, and just, kind of commenting on their collection. Ooh, that's cool. Or, oh, I wish I had that. One of the common things, though, that I see on social media when it comes to vinyl records is a discussion about, do cheap record players like Crosley, Victrola, or just your kind of low end record players that tend to be in the 100 or less range, are they destroying your records? Okay. And for the most part, people tend to answer this emotionally. They'll either say, yes, of course it's hurting your records without any real reason behind it, or they'll say, it's not hurting your records. I have heard from blah, blah, blah that your record is fine. And they tend to just answer emotionally, and there's really no science or thought behind the answer. It's more of an emotional response because some people really care about this, some people don't care about this so much. So let me explain in a few minutes what's happening to your record, scientifically, if you will. And we can also talk about if the record is something that you're interested in, what I recommend that you do in order to have a record player that isn't damaging your records. Now, let me say this right off the bat. There are other things that come into account than the main subject I'm going to talk about, which is tracking force. There is skating or anti-skating. There is whether or not your record player is has the right type of drive. Is it belt driven? Is it motor driven? There are other factors, but the primary thing that I want to talk about today is tracking force, which is the force of the needle coming down onto the record as it drags, and the durability of the record itself. So how much does the record resist damage when it has a needle on it? Here's the thing. If you think about it, the more tracking force you have, the more likely it is you're going to damage the record. Regardless of what people say of, oh, that's not bad tracking force, it's not going to hurt your record. Well, there's some truth to that, but generally speaking, it's just pure physics. The more force, the more likely it is to have damage. I want you to imagine that your arm is your record arm and the needle coming down, and this hand is the record. I want you to press down fairly hard and then try to move your hand. You're going to scrape and drag. And that's because it's coming down fairly hard. The harder this is coming down, the more likely that you're dragging and possibly scratching, ripping, other kinds of things to the surface. This is just how reality works. The less tracking force, though, or the less pressure you come down, the easier it is to move and the less damage scraping that you're doing. So it's true that the more tracking force you have, the less gentle it is on the record. Very true. However, you also have to think about the durability of the record itself. So how much does the record resist problems? Records were designed, at least initially, to take a tracking force of up to 6 grams for a life of approximately 100 plays or the equivalent. So if you played it through completely 100 times at a weight of 6 grams, theoretically the record should be okay without any real damage until some point thereafter. So records were made relatively durable. So you could say that people with the argument of, oh, as long as my cheap record player, like a Crosley, doesn't have more than 6 grams of tracking force, and as long as I'm not playing it a ton, it's no big deal. And again, there is some truth to that argument. But let's talk about some of the factors, though, that you have to take into account. Okay? Now, again, there are other factors at play, such as, is there warble? Is there the possibility of scratching because there's anti-skating issues? Is it possible that your cheap record player it isn't put together right, and so it actually has more than 6 grams of tracking force? All of these things are possibilities. But let's just assume, though, your record is working perfectly. It's under 6 grams. There are other factors, though, as well. Take into account, if you're playing a cheap record player, you're probably playing cheap older records from places like the Goodwill. Okay? And they have probably been played a lot. So you have to take into account that even though you may have only played it a couple of times, that record probably was played many times beforehand. So you may have already crossed that 100 plays threshold already. So keep that in mind. If you like cheap records, they're probably used and they've probably been played a lot. Another factor that you need to take into account with your if you have a cheap record player, not every record is made with the same quality. Some places have better pressing, better chemicals. Some places are not. So that 100 plays may be substantially reduced if you did not have a good pressing. Okay? So it just depends upon how well they made that record, what kind of ingredients, what type of pressing was it, did they do it right, was it one that was kind of a slash job. One other thing that I want you to take into account is that some records are designed to have much more clarity of sound than others. Some of them are more sensitive than others. Think about it. If you like the Beatles and you want to listen to it backwards and hear Paul is Dead, that takes some clarity when it comes to your record player. And if you are going to be playing your record a lot and a lot and a lot, the more you play it, the more likely that it is that little nuances of it are going to get harder to hear. And that's, again, because the record is slowly breaking down over time. This is just what happens when you have a physical medium. So, ultimately, the bottom line is this. Because there are numerous factors at play, if you have a higher tracking force on your cheap record player, yes, you are more likely causing damage, even if you have it 6 grams or less, because the record might be old, the record may not be perfect in and of itself. There might be other issues with your record player where it's not at 100% performance. So what do I recommend to you? If you are somebody who barely listens to your records, you just like to put it on occasion, you probably listen to it maybe, 10 times a year, you probably aren't going to care a ton about the record anyway. You're probably not your super vinyl, uber vinyl person. So, you know what, if you want to have a cheap Crosley, go for it. It's fine. Your cheaper, older records probably are getting beat up by it, but who cares? You're only going to play it a few times anyway. You probably aren't that sensitive to little nuances anyway. However, from there, I suggest the following. For every 50 anticipated plays, you need to expect to spend at least $50 to $75 for your record player in addition. So that's at minimum. So if you're 50 or less plays, whatever, use your cheap Crosley, which is somewhere in the $50 to $75 range. If you're going to take it beyond that, if you think you might get close to that 100 play range, or your records might already be in that 100 play range, you probably should at least add another $50 to $100, meaning somewhere a record player that's somewhere in that $100 to $150 range, which has less tracking force more than likely. That's probably a good starting place. Bare minimum, if you're going to play your record more than on occasion, you probably need to spend somewhere in the $100 to $150 range and try to find lower tracking force. If you think you're going to go beyond the normal life of a record of 100 plus plays, then we're talking in the $200 some range. Again, $50 to $75 from there for every 50 plus plays is a starting point. So the reality is, unless you're going to play your record on a very, very occasional basis, you probably do want to go above a Crosley. You probably want to go above a Victrola, simply because there are too many factors at play for that record to be kept well and for it not to be worn out relatively quickly. There's just too many possibilities of something going wrong, and you'll probably be better off just spending a little bit more money. That is really the reality. It's not an emotional response. It's based upon just the physical reality of the medium. Please let me know what you think in the comments. Put in your own additional thoughts, your own record recommendations, and I hope you have a great day. Bye-bye.